Welcome to Kokua Council's meeting with the Hawaii House District 24 candidates. We have Jillian Anderson, Ikaika Olds, and Adrian Tam. I'm Lila Mower, President of Kokua Council, and my colleagues are joining us via Zoom and Facebook. I have two colleagues who are helping me host this today, Rick Tabor and Doug Matsuoka. Thank you very much, Rick and Doug. Mahalo to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. Kokua Council's mission is to advocate, inform, and educate to improve the laws and policies which impact our community. So let's start with our candidates forum. We are giving each of our candidates 5 minutes each, and we're going to start with Jillian Anderson. Jillian, please introduce yourself.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Jillian Anderson, and I am the Republican candidate for our new State House District 24, Waikiki, and a bit of Kapi'olani. I would first like to start off by thanking our esteemed Kokua Council for facilitating this forum today. From day one of my candidacy, I really want this election to be about the issues, and I believe that everyone in our state government should have the same perspective. So I'd really like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to discuss the issues, as well as for my fellow candidates for joining me and allowing us to have this nice discussion that we will be having today. So I'm sure to almost all of you that I'm a fresh face. I have lived in Waikiki almost my entire life after moving here at just 3 years old with my family. I attended Sacred Hearts Academy from kindergarten through 12th grade in Kaimuki. And following my high school graduation, I knew that I never wanted to leave our beautiful state. So I was honored to be admitted directly as a freshman to our Scheidler College of Business here at our University of Hawaii at Manoa. There I majored in business, focusing on entrepreneurship, finance, and marketing. And I also have a deep passion for American history in particular. So I have a minor in history. Following my graduation, we came into the coronavirus pandemic. And I'm sure, like many of you, we became much more hyper aware of our government, seeing our leaders' daily press conferences and seeing what a big role our state government leaders play in our lives. So I did stumble upon our State House of Representatives live stream of the floor sessions, and I became completely engrossed in the activities of our state legislature. From there, I was honored to have a role in our House Minority Research Office in this most recent 2022 legislative session, where I was able to work on a daily basis with our 4 House Republicans. I was able to watch our committee hearings, follow bills, and really understand the process from the inside out. Reasons why I'm running is for 2 reasons. One of which is just being a resident here almost my entire life, I'm seeing things go downhill. As a young professional, I see my friends really leaving the island in droves because they cannot afford to live here. There is not a big enough job market for the passions that they wish to pursue, and it's really quite discouraging. I also fear for my personal safety. As a young woman, I really don't like walking alone on my own streets outside my condominium alone, whether it's day or night, which I think is a really sad story for living in such a highly populated area and a global tourism destination. So for my personal reasons, I would really like to improve my community. But I also feel like I bring a lot of experience from what I've seen in the legislature, and I understand how the process works and how it can be used for good and to achieve these ends. So this is a little bit introduction about me, and I'm just looking forward to having the opportunity to potentially serve my community and make it the place that we all know it can be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jillian. All right, Ikaika, you're up next, please.
Hi, good morning. Rather close to good afternoon to everybody. My name is Ikaika Olds. I just want to get started by saying thank you so much for allowing us to come together like this. I think this is a very important way for people to be able to see and hear from their candidates, especially coming out of the coronavirus pandemic. So just a little bit about myself. I originally am from Kailua, born and raised. I graduated from Kailua High School. I'm a 9/11 kid. So after 9/11, I felt a compelling need to serve our country. So I went down to my local recruiting office and found my way into the Army. I spent 8 years as an infantryman, 2 deployments to Iraq. And I came home and I wanted to continue my service. And I ended up going to school. I got my bachelor's and master's in psychology, and particularly in forensic psychology. And then for the last 6 years, I've been working extensively with our homeless population in Waikiki and in Honolulu in general, but I've also worked island-wide because my clients tend to move. The only reason why I'm even deciding to run is because my neighbor got broken into at the condominium that we're at. She's a very close friend of ours. She's an auntie to my children, and it popped the bubble. I already have been working with the homeless, so I understand the nature of that world. Crime is often intertwined with their lifestyle. But we were home that morning, we were getting our boys ready for daycare, and where they broke into was only 4 feet away from our unit. So I decided to pay attention to what was going on in our local politics, and I didn't like what I was seeing. And going out there, talking to our community, the number one concern right now is safety. It's public safety. Crime and homelessness is the number one talking words amongst the people in our community. And I'm the only individual that's coming with that kind of experience, boots on the ground, dealing with both crime and homelessness. So moving forward, I want to bring that experience, real experience, to the legislature to be able to bring grassroots, real models that can work and drive policy to make things safer, particularly getting tough on crime.
Thank you very much, Ikaika. All right, Adrian, are you ready? You're next.
Aloha, thank you, Lila, and thank you, Doug and Rick, for hosting this candidate forum, and to all of Kokua Council for joining us this morning. My name is Adrian Tam. In 2020, I ran for office because I didn't like what I was seeing. I didn't run for an open seat. I ran against a 14-year incumbent, and the people were wanting change, and I was honored to have and privileged to have the opportunity to serve this beautiful area in the Hawaii State Legislature. A little bit about me: I'm the proud son of immigrants from both Taiwan and Hong Kong. My parents came here with nothing, and we grew up in low-income housing. I'm a proud graduate of our public schools, but before that, I went to Honwanji Mission School and then Kalani High School. And I was one of the first in my family to go off to college, where I majored in history. I graduated from Penn State within 4 years, and I still have many connections there, and I still love the people there. But I wanted to come back home. I worked for my family's small business, and I wanted to take care of my grandmother as well, who's aging in place right now. I became a realtor, and when I was young, right after graduating college, I became a realtor. So oftentimes it's hard for someone just to trust a college graduate with the biggest financial decision of their lives. So I decided to take a hand at public service by working in the state legislature for one session. And it was then and there where I worked under former Speaker Calvin Say, where I fell in love with public service and decided to stay and to try to come up with some of the solutions to some of our biggest problems that we have. From there, I worked with Senator Stanley Chang for 3 years before running for office. I'm really proud of the work that I've done even before being elected, from banning conversion therapy for LGBT minors to providing property damage insurance for landlords and property owners that rent out to Section 8 tenants, to creating a youth council. But the work didn't just stop there. I ran for office because there was a lack of affordable housing, there was a lack of opportunities. And these lack of opportunities oftentimes put people in situations where they resort to a life of crime, or they end up homeless. And instead of complaining about the solution, I sought to be a part of this. Complaining about the problem, I sought to be a part of the solution. So I ran for office on ideas and not just talking about these problems. And that's why you see me lay out very specific items that I want to achieve, these initiatives that I want to do. And I think that's important for someone who's running for office. And that's why I'm running for re-election again, because we have made a lot of strides in diversifying our economy, in solving public safety issues, combating homelessness. Because I truly believe it's not enough to talk about these problems, but to come up with innovative, never been done before solutions. And that's what I offer to the table, and that's why I'm running for re-election again.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Well, what's happening today is that we have members of both parties, Democrat and Republican, in one forum, which is quite unusual. We've seen forums on TV where one party was represented, and then on another day, another party. But today we have an opportunity to listen to 3 candidates with, I would say, similar points of views about Waikiki. All of you mentioned concerns about public safety or crime. I admire the fact that the three of you are youthful, young, and so I look forward to hearing about your innovative ideas, your take on things. I'm going to introduce my colleagues from Kokua Council, and they will pose you questions. Each candidate will have up to 3 minutes to answer questions. So the first colleague is Dale. Dale, are you ready?
Oh, sure. Say, gang, this is a simple question. This would be hard to get 3 minutes out of a simple question, all right? Would you be willing to accept only donations from constituents within your own area? It's a yes or no question, but let me clarify why I asked that question. We have found that business interests will send donations to people who are leadership positions. And they, for the money, they kill the bill and won't even schedule it. It is very unfair to constituents to get their representatives to introduce a bill, but then while it might pass in one side chamber, it gets killed in the other chamber. It's very unfair. That's why we have this corruption problem. So we willing to accept donations only from donors within your own constituency, House District 24. Thank you.
Thank you. So Ikaika, if you'd be the first to answer, then Adrian, then Jillian. Thank you. Ikaika?
I just want to start off by saying thank you for saying that I'm young. Checks in the mail for that. But that's a great question. And in light of what's been going on this year, particularly what's been happening in 2022, there's been a big highlight in what's going on alleged in terms of corruption, people taking money they're not supposed to. And as we talk about like the development, pay to play, developers paying money in order to get projects approved faster. There's also a pay to play system going on within the legislature. And whether we catch it or we don't catch it, transparency is always going to be a big problem. And I know you guys did Kim Coco, and she actually touched on this when she talked about lawyers and the privilege. And I believe that that's a big, big, big problem. I don't think money should be the driving force for why people win campaigns. I think that I would absolutely say yes, money only from the constituency within the district. I don't think there should be any special interest groups allowed to donate money to local politics. And I also would like to see a cap for every candidate, that you can only spend this much money versus right now, what do we have? We have candidates able to receive unlimited amount of funds. And oftentimes it's in favor of the incumbent because that's the nature of the game. So to answer your question, yes, I would support that, money only from the constituency within the district.
Thank you, Ikaika. All right, Adrian, your response, please.
Thank you so much for that question. As you can see, there's a lack of public trust in our government, especially in light of the two former legislators that were indicted. And when it comes to this question, I'm going to say no, because I've accepted money from outside of my district, but a lot of money has come from within the district. When we go out there into the state legislature, we are not just district representatives, we are state representatives. We look out not just for our districts, but for the entire state. And that being said, I do believe it's time to root out money from our political system and make sure that there's more transparency. Right now, PACs are allowed to give money that are under, you don't have to disclose publicly, PACs that give under $100. And for our campaign, we've already rejected several PACs that have given us money, such as PACs from the tobacco industry. At the same time, I'm also hoping that we could propose a more full-time legislature so that legislators cannot have outside jobs when they are not only in session, but out of session as well. So they're always in session and they cannot have that outside influence making their decisions. So that is what I am proposing to better our legislative, but also support banning fundraising of any kind during the legislative session if we don't move to a full-time legislature.
Thank you, Adrian. Jillian, your response, please.
Thank you very much for that question, Dale. So I believe that the role of a representative is to be answerable to one entity and one entity alone, and that is the constituents of the district of those who represented them, of those who elected them into that office. I do see that there is also a general need to look over the welfare of the state, but first and foremost, the representative of those in Waikiki and that portion of Kapiolani should be answerable to them. And I think that the money that helps elect them should come from that district. I myself have been reluctant, and in the future will be reluctant to take any funds from special interest groups, because if I am elected, I really don't want anything held over my head down the line, because I want to be able to vote only in the best interest of those in Waikiki. So I want 100% only take funds from those in my district, but I also think that I have been speaking with people as a Republican that so many people don't feel like the people who are running in their district would represent them. So I do think that maybe there should be support from other residents who would like a candidate of their political party who could help represent their ideology. So I do support your mindset, but also as a Republican, I think that I would be a voice for those as well. And I agree with Adrian that there should not be campaign contributions during the legislative session.
Thank you very much, Jillian. All right, the next question comes from Doug, and then it would be Adrian who answers first, then Jillian, then Ikaika.
Hi, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. I'm H. Doug Matsuoka. I'm a volunteer director here at Kokua Council. I just turned 70. I'm a senior, but I work full-time at Hawaii Meals on Wheels. Just mentioning this to our youthful candidates so they are aware that seniors are providers of social services and not just consumers of social services. And I also participate in Food Not Bombs that provides for the hungry in Thomas Square on Sundays. And we're seeing a lot more seniors out on the streets. And now to my question. Kokua Council, one of our issues, of course, is aging in place. My question is really about a place to age. It's kind of an affordability question. Other municipalities, other countries, other states have some form of rent control on things like the limits, you can increase the rent, the length of notice required. For instance, in Hawaii, you can double the rent. That's easy. And you have 45 days to find a new place once your landlord gives you notice. And you don't have to show cause if you're a long-term tenant. You can just be evicted for no reason. In other places, of course, that's very different, and it's a lot different in many other states. In other countries, in Leipzig, Germany, the rentals are required to be within the market rate for that area. So there are different ways to control things. We are told that rent in Hawaii is high because it's a desirable place to live. No question about that. Is it that, or is it because we have so few tenant-friendly controls on rent? So my question is, are you willing to consider rent control legislation of some kind to help seniors have a place to age in place?
Yes. Thank you so much for your question, Doug, and thank you so much for your service. I absolutely do support some sort of rent control. It's become way too out of hand right now in terms of living in Hawaii. The issue is not, for me, is not just, looking at how putting this in place, but how we do it. So what we want to avoid when we put in some sort of rent control is the a la carte system, as I call it, when our landlords decide to tack on many other kinds of fees, such as electricity, to maintenance, to cable, to water, sewer, etc. onto it. And oftentimes, if those add up, that could be more than the rent itself, thus pushing an individual outside of their household. But what we really need alongside rent control is to ensure that we have an inventory of units that are readily available for people here in Hawaii. To keep it at market rate right now, we don't have rent control, and there are still, units that are being rented out for a very high amount right now. There is a demand for them, there is a need for them, and Hopefully rent control can fix that, but the real solution not only has to be rent control, but also increasing the supply of units that we have on hand.
Thank you, Adrian. Jillian, you're next.
Thank you very much for your question, Doug. It is a very real problem. I think that this transcends age groups where so many people are living paycheck to paycheck, but especially for our kapuna, many are on fixed income or they're living social security check to social security check. So I would definitely be open to legislation that would put some sort of control in terms of the increase in rents. How much notice needs to be given, how much of a proportion of the previous rent that rent would be able to increase at any given time, whether this would be tied to the increase in, say, our average utility price, whether it would be tied to an increase in the area median income. I definitely think that there needs to be some sort of control in place so that we can make sure that our local residents, especially our kapuna, aren't in danger of being priced out of our market, because for them, there's really nowhere else to go. And we're seeing more and more of our elderly being forced onto the streets, and that's just becoming a much bigger concern. So I would support that. And I also do see the plights of our landlords with our cost of living rising and having to support themselves and see it as an investment property. But at the end of the day, we have an affordability crisis, we have a housing crisis, and I would put the tenants' needs first for now.
And
Thank you. And then Ikaika.
Doug, thank you so much for the important question. And I want to hit this in two aspects. So I agree with what Jillian said. This transcends just our kapuna. And while our kapuna are a major factor because most of them are living on fixed income, we're only going to see that problem get worse as more and more of the baby boomer generation enters into a later stage of development. And what's happening is, I want to use an example. My wife's grandfather was 102 years old. And he lived at a senior home, and he was paying $9,000 a month to live there. So he was a World War II veteran, he's an EC veteran, and when he retired, there was no way that he would be able to predict how expensive being able to live with dignity was going to be at this extended age. So with that, it's definitely one huge problem that's going to explode in the next 10, 20 years. So what we need to do is we need to find more ways to be able to keep kapuna in the homes, house in place, whether it's can we get grants or subsidies or tax breaks for current landlords who are housing kapuna, who are trying to house in place? Do we need to build more public or private, that state-backed kapuna homes across the islands, across the state? But on the flip end, the reason why I keep looking down at my phone is just this morning, I was down at IHS getting a family into shelter. So they were staying at Kewala Basin, right in your guys' back door in a car. They got evicted this morning. And the problem with that living situation was they were living at an illegal rental. So they were living at this Chinese monster home. Everything was cash. And what happened was the landlord wanted them out and changed the locks this morning. So when she went to go take her kids out to their daycare, she came home, she couldn't get back into her house. So it's happening in multiple levels, and it's affecting everybody. And I apologize again that I'm on my phone, but she has to go get a COVID test in order to get into the shelter. But this transcends. So I definitely think there should be regulations put into place. One, to monitor, what's going on with the housing market that's already available. Two, to build more housing, particularly for our kapuna, because that's going to become a major issue in the next 10 to 20 years. And my father is one of those people that's going to be, he's living on his own right now. He's 75, but soon he's not going to be able to do that anymore. I have two small children. My sister has two small children. Who's going to be able to take care of him at home? He's going to need to eventually move on to something where he can be safe and have his dignity. But how is he going to be able to afford it? Because I already know he didn't account for that in his budgeting when he retired.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, our next question comes from Gary. And then the order in which to answer would be Jillian, Ikaika, then Adrian. Gary, are you ready?
Yep. Thank you. For those of you who attended the last forum, I had asked a question about the rail and how it's a black hole, albeit a federal and a county black hole. We have the next potential black hole is the new Aloha Stadium entertainment redevelopment, and the state is projecting that they might contribute up to $350 million. Of course, I'm in the aftermath, in the current environment. I'm not confident that we can stay under 350 million, and that it will be a multi-decade black hole, and then we'll certainly double it to 700 million. But when we do these things, it diverts our financial resources from places like you've already spoke of, public safety. What do we need to do to have the developers bear all the risk beyond 350 million? I hope I'm making sense. Thank you. Adrian, we begin with you.
I think I'm actually first for this round, if you don't mind.
Oh, Jillian, thank you. Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you very much for bringing up this subject, Gary. I agree with you that our rail project has been a complete disaster. I can't even keep up with how long we've been in this process and how much it's cost. I think that right now we need to proceed with extreme caution if we're going to embark on yet another project when this project is not even close to finish and continues to come up with problem after problem. We need to approach these things that there is going to be serious issue, and it's not going to be under budget or under the timeline. I think that the plans for the Aloha Stadium district are wonderful if they could be executed, but like you, I have very little confidence that that's possible. And I think that we should at least semi-finish one project before we start another. I think that right now it is a black hole. Right now we have that 3% county surcharge for the county of Honolulu that is imposed on our tourism industry. And it began as 1/3 of that taxation goes towards our rail, and that will be increased to half. And that equates to tens of millions of dollars per year. So we are just looking for places to funnel money into this, and we're really not seeing any results. I would 100% want to be able to have confidence in our developers that their budgets are accurate, that their plans are at least logical, that, for example, wheels not fitting the track, that we could have some sort of integrated authority that's able to oversee the entire process. We're not reinventing the wheel with many of these projects. We see place after place executing much bigger infrastructure and development needs. But for some reason, we're not able to. And I am very happy with the construction jobs that it's bringing into our state. But to what end is it worth it? So I would very much be open to exploring how can we have our developers be more accountable, stay within their budget, and I would definitely want to focus on our rail first before embarking on our Aloha Stadium project.
Forgive me, Lila. Who's next?
That would be Ikaika next, please.
I actually just want to get started by saying that was awesome, Jillian. Very thoughtful. And I'm going to start off, and I agree with what she said. My wife and I, before we had children, before we settled down, we traveled extensively. It's my wife's passion, and we did it while we were able to. And you know, the one thing about the rail is a mess. It's a hot mess. And the biggest problem about the rail is there's no oversight, there's no auditing, there's no accountability. And we have to take a look at what's going to happen with this massive project that's going to be taking over at the stadium, where there's already so much public outcry that was against this development in that area. And like what Jillian was saying, this and what you're saying, this is the next big black hole, or has the potential to be. And we could learn from the mistakes we made with the rail, or we're going to continue with that status quo, and we're going to have new heads of whatever organization is overseeing this, like how HART is, and then they keep jumping, and there's no accountability, and money is just dumping down the drain, and we have all these problems. So what I would propose is a cap, a state cap that's put, and the contractors have to agree, the developers have to agree that if they supersede this estimated agreement cap, they're now responsible for everything else that comes. Now that actually comes with some negatives. because as we're seeing in Kaka'ako with some of those new buildings that went up, they cut corners. I have friends all over Kaka'ako, and they're complaining about all the problems in their brand new buildings. And there's not problems that are happening in my 50-year-old condominium. So we also need to make sure that there's safeguards in place to ensure that if it does go past that cap, the developers are not cutting corners to cut cost, because that's going to be a huge safety liability. We learned that from Florida, that is going to be increasing insurance premiums, which is affecting all condominium owners. So I agree with Jillian, she was outstanding. And just to add on to that, there definitely needs to be a cap, and there needs to be oversight and accountability.
Thank you, Ikaika. Adrian?
Thank you for that question. I do agree with the two other candidates and their sentiments on the rail and as well as the upcoming project at Aloha Stadium. To add on to that, not only do I want oversight, but legislative oversight, because we as electeds are the ones that are being held accountable by the people on their tax dollars. So we just as much have a bigger stake in it. And I'm hoping that with the legislative oversight, we could be tough on these individuals and these developers to make sure that they are doing everything on time, not cutting corners, and make sure that money is spent wisely. At the same time, I would like to make sure that none of this money is going towards useless costs. That most of the all of the costs should be going towards the workers and the material to build the project. One of the biggest problems with the rail was that we spent millions of dollars on various consultants. And as a result, we're getting, viewpoints from various different areas and nothing's getting done. So, when the wheels didn't match, we hired a consultant. When we couldn't finish in time, when things were going wrong, we hired a consultant. It's these consultants' costs that are really driving up some of these things. And that doesn't make sense. And that's something that I would want to propose, which is to stop the fees going to various consultants. So alongside with what the other candidates said, which is all absolutely 100% correct, and I like to see that be done, I would like to impose legislative oversight and a prohibition on hiring more consultants than anyone already needs on a certain project like this upcoming one at Aloha Stadium. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Lila.
Thank you very much. All right, our next question comes from Greg, and the order of response would be Ikaika, then Adrian, then Jillian.
Aloha, all of you. I've had the pleasure of being able to meet all of you. So I was at some point during my walks through Waikiki or doing HPD patrols, I was able to meet each of you at some point, or with Adrian, it was a cleanup at one of the parks. So we thank you for your time today and to answer all of our questions. I have a specific question I'm going to read off of a piece of paper. It makes it easier, just to give you a little background information. And it has to do with condo living and concerns with just the housing costs. So since I purchased my current home in January 2019, which is a condominium in Waikiki, my maintenance fees have increased over 35%. In 2018, the master insurance policies for the building and association totaled $106,000 with a $5,000 deductible. These policies currently total $396,000 with a $50,000 deductible, which is an increase of 271% in just 4 years. Our previous management company has quit us. Our former well-known association attorney has quit us, and we have had 5 different site managers. There was a recent loan for $3 million, and now the board is asking for another $2 million loan this year to address deferred maintenance issues that should have been addressed years ago. These issues and others are not just impacting my building, but are seen in condominium associations throughout Hawaii. The result is that many will not be able to afford to live in their homes, and many kapuna on fixed incomes may be forced to sell their homes. So my questions, 2-part, are: 1, if elected, what would you do to address this ever-increasing problem, which in many cases is a result of mismanaged associations? And 2, What would you do to ensure that the state laws that the legislature enacts and which are codified in Hawaii Revised Statutes 514B are upheld with enforcement so condo owners' rights are not violated and everyone can afford to live in their homes?
Thank you for that question, Greg. I just want to get started by saying that I am a condo owner myself. Like I mentioned previously, our building is rather old, it's 50 years old. In the area that I live in by Iolani School, most of the condominiums that were built in that time. So 1969, 1970, and into the early 70s. And what ends up happening is we do have a lot of catch-up repairs that need to be done for buildings so old. And we do defer, our building does defer some of the work that needs to be done, and they just kick it down the road. And like you, we've had 4 different resident managers, 3 different presidents. We've jumped 3 times in terms of management, and we just finished a really huge retrofitting. And the problem with the retrofitting is we went through different people, both on the boards, both within our management, and things changed. While people were coming and going, things changed and costs started to go up. And in the end, we had a lot of kapuna. We have a lot of the original owner occupants that bought in 1969 still living here, including my neighbor, who's a Korean War vet, who lives on a fixed income, that they gave some options. You pay this upfront, $70,000, or we're going to increase the maintenance. And they took a vote. Who wants to increase the maintenance? The question about it was, the vote didn't get to everybody. So some people weren't even able to vote, and they increased the maintenance. And now, you add hundreds and hundreds of dollars onto a maintenance fee, you're going to start outpricing the kapuna who are living there. And because of the association rules, you're stuck. And, I 100% agree that the legislation that has to go forward needs to be able to protect and hold, the associations accountable. I feel like a prisoner in my own home. I've gotten into arguments many times with my association, and they always flex on their power, as does the property management. So homeowners need to have the ability to be able to fight back and hold those who have the power in control, especially when there's already laws. And part of that is just educating the homeowners what your rights are and what you're entitled to. And if you're being wronged, this is what you need to do.
Thank you very much, Ikaika. Adrian, your response, please.
Thank you, Greg, for that question. I too live in a condo, and I really believe that condo living is sort of like the future because it's more environmentally friendly, especially when we're looking at a limited amount of space to build housing. So as our condos age, the price of maintenance continues to go up. And because many of our seniors are living in these condominiums, and many of our young professionals are living in condominiums as well, because this issue is not just limited to our seniors, there should be a fund that at the state that is dedicated to upkeeping some of these older condominiums, because many of us are living on fixed income or are not making enough right now. That being said, to ensure that there is some sort of accountability when it comes to condo boards, as I've worked with the Kokua Council before, I am going to introduce a legislation that would create a condo liaison that answers to a state board that not only handles complaints, but helps draft legislation with the state legislature to help better put accountability laws on our condominiums and our associations. So that is what I'll be doing.
Thank you, Adrian. All right, Jillian, your answer, please.
Thank you very much for that question, Greg. I too live in a condominium in Waikiki. I have for many years. Even though I'm young, I do attend my board meetings with many of our kapuna. I like to go through our financial statements. Having been a finance major, it interests me, and I am blown away by how much our maintenance is and continues to rise year over year. And oftentimes it says that it's due to utility costs, but we're also always told that if we don't increase our maintenance, that we're going to be hit with an assessment down the line. But nonetheless, we're looking at month by month, can we afford this maintenance? Can we afford to continue to live here? And we're basing this off of projections 30 years down the line, what may be headed for Waikiki, such as sea level rise. There was a bill, and I apologize, I'm remiss if it did pass or not, but I believe that it made the projections need to be a 30-year projection versus 25-year, which is only going to increase our maintenance costs because we're putting 5 extra years, and there is absolutely no way that we can know what's going to happen 30 years from now in terms of our environmental needs, the needs of the infrastructure, the needs of our buildings maintenance. So I think that we definitely need to hold our associations accountable with how these financial projections are made, as well as the insurance companies with what we are factoring in, because I feel like we're factoring in for the absolute worst, and that is just not sustainable for our kapuna and for those who struggle to live here on a monthly basis. And I think that we have buildings in many different stages. So for your building, it sounds that you have a lot of deferred maintenance, which possibly could have been remedied through legislation that requires such things to have been fixed before this present moment where it seems more urgent. One such example is fire sprinklers. We had the Marco Polo fire 5 years ago. Last week was the anniversary. And I think that that really brought to light how many buildings are in need of fire sprinkler systems. And that's just another cost that for Marco Polo, it came down to, there was a vote, should we do it or not? And it came down to cost, and it cost people's lives. So if we can have more legislation that can help stop deferred maintenance from even becoming an issue, and on the other side, look at the financial projections and to see how realistic is it to be basing maintenance on in 2022 on something that may happen in 2052. So I would come at it from both sides. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There's one thing I just want to mention to all of you. The key focus here is that there are established statutes within 514B that actually, the intent of them are to address the deferred maintenance, to make sure that the building is maintained properly. So if you read the codified statutes, that's my concern, that we have statutes on the record. They're not being followed by the management companies and the associations, the boards. And what, hopefully you'll look at that. What will you do to enact change so that these laws that are already on the books are actually enforced? That's the key. So I appreciate all of your answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. All right, Kathy, you're next, and your question will go to Adrian first, then Jillian, then Ikaika. Thank you.
Thank you guys for being here. We all appreciate it. My question is, what your thoughts are, what you think you could do to help the workforce shortage for caregivers throughout the state. Well, actually, it's a national problem, but especially here in Hawaii. Jillian mentioned earlier that people are leaving because it costs too much to live here. But the kapuna continue to age. We're the fastest growing aging population in the nation, and it's getting critical without caregivers. So your thoughts on what can be done to remedy that situation?
Thank you, Kathy, for this question. This question actually hits very close to home for me because I too am a caregiver for my grandmother who's aging in place right now. And one of the issues that we're constantly running into is time. And how much are we able to write off on a tax credit? Right now, we could write off about $500, but we take her to blood tests, to the doctors here, and that drives up a lot of costs. And $500 of a refundable tax credit is not doable. So what we need to do is increase that for our currently existing, family caretakers that are taking care of their relatives aging in place right now. But we should also be looking at our community colleges to, educate in nursing programs, caregiver programs, to increase the interest in those, and possibly providing some kind of loan forgiveness to the state if they were to pursue higher education through the 4-year system at the University of Hawaii. In terms of keeping our kids here too, we should also be, I'm sorry, I lost the train of thought. We should also be making sure that housing is affordable to everyone. Housing continues to be the biggest driving cost of why people are leaving right now. It's not just jobs, as Jillian mentioned. She's absolutely correct in that matter. But, you have a job, you have 2 jobs, you have 3 jobs, and still that's not enough to pay for housing. What's left to do if you have a grandmother who needs help? You either have to move back into your family's house or you have to live with her. And sometimes that's not feasible, especially if there's a pandemic and you have underlying conditions and you're constantly going out working as well. So I would definitely look at the University of Hawaii system to try to see if there's any kind of program that can be expedited to ensure that we train individuals to work in caregiving, and loan forgiveness for those that are looking into these programs so that they don't feel financially burdened with debt. And if we do provide them that loan forgiveness, we make sure that they at least stay in Hawaii and work in Hawaii so that once they take out that loan, they're here for a set amount of time working and giving back to the community that gave them that loan forgiveness. So thank you so much for your question.
Thank you, Adrian.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you very much for your question. And thank you for alluding to my other answer. So as I had mentioned that, yes, we definitely have a big exodus of our youth here. I don't know if we've hit it yet, but I know that we're approaching the point where we will have more of our population be over the age of 65 than under the age of 18. And this is going to exacerbate so many problems that we have. And for our workforce, in many other sectors, we're facing a shortage, but we cannot just import caregivers. There's no other substitute. We need them here, and in the best situation, we would want them to be our homegrown children that grow up and want to give back to their community. I think that for young people, as like Adrian had mentioned, having an opportunity through our community colleges or through education programs to be put on this track. I know so many of my friends, they're on the mainland right now, and they're following the healthcare track, but only one of which went into caregiving to work with somebody in their own home. It is a very emotionally strenuous job to have to be with somebody at their end of life. And it's not even your family, but you feel like you become their ohana. So I definitely think that is an extremely fulfilling job to have. And I think that many of our youth are open and willing to be doing it, but it's just giving them the option to, number one, know that it's a path for them and to be able to be educated and to follow this through to enter this sector, and also this affordability problem that we have, making it that this is even economically feasible for them. So making this the same level of recognition as our other healthcare workers, that you can work with somebody one-on-one. You don't need to be working in a doctor's office or an emergency room, that this is a part of our healthcare too, and it's sorely needed.
Thank you.
Ikaika, you're next, please.
Going third is, I get to piggyback off of the previous two fantastic answers. But there is something that wasn't being addressed. So we talked about, getting more nurses out there, and we talked about the cost of living. And yes, those are big factors. In 2009, I got home from Iraq. I had to spend 3 months of leave, and I was going to head out to Afghanistan. And I decided to get out for two reasons. One, I met my wife, but two, my mother was going through early onset of Alzheimer's, and she was now needing full-time care. So I came home to help my dad. And unfortunately, she passed from the disease some years ago. But I lived that life of having to do 100% care of someone who is not able to take care of themselves in the least bit, through all the stages, from when she was able to walk, which is dementia, and then able to speak, all the way through she was bedridden and needed much more care. So one problem that hasn't been addressed is, yes, we need more nurses, but nursing is a very diverse field. And I'm just looking at the statistics right now. UH graduated 228 nurses in the spring semester. That's a lot. But the problem is the people who are doing this home care oftentimes are not nurses that are RNs or have a bachelor's degree in nursing. A lot of the times, the nurses that are needed are CNAs. And the problem about that is CNAs are an entry-level position into the nursing field. They're not paid well. They do some of the hardest work. They have almost as much bedtime as some of the regular attending nurses and the doctors put together. And my wife went through a CNA program. She got a bachelor's degree in biology, and she wanted to go to PA school, and she needs some clinical hours. And it was rough for her. It was very rough for her, because when you're dealing with the seniors, it's very hard to clean somebody with a sponge bath that you don't know. Clean up poop, feces. It's a hard role, and we need more CNAs. It's not just nurses. It's not just RNs. We need more CNAs, because they do a lot of the entry-level care that especially our kapuna need. And the problem about that is CNAs don't get paid well. And that's something that needs to be addressed. And you can argue all you want about supply and demand, but as our population, like I said, the baby boomers continue to age, next 10, 20 years, we're going to have a huge increase of seniors that are going to be needing care. It's not going to be the RNs. It's not going to be the nurses with master's degrees or nurse practitioners that are going to be coming out to your house to be doing basic services. It's probably going to be a CNA. We need to pay our CNAs more. And that is definitely something that I would want to push, whether it's KCC or it's the Red Cross, getting more people to be interested in that role, because it's going to be hard to sell being a CNA versus being an RN. You get paid a lot more. You're a lot more respected. You get to work in a variety of fields within a hospital.
We're at 3 minutes right now.
And so I would push for that.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you addressed the CNA thing because I'm a CNA instructor. I have my own school, and there is no reimbursement for their college tuition, which is what I'm trying to get across to, that there needs to be from state. So, but thank you very much, everybody.
Hello, candidates. It's my turn for my question. It's not really a question. I got into advocacy from the time I was very young. In elementary school, I already started doing volunteer work. I work primarily with disabled people, but I got into advocacy in 2013 because a condominium in which I owned a unit had experienced embezzlement and corruption. And in recent days, in the last couple of years, we've been reading a lot about corruption in our government. So I would like for you to address concerns about corruption. It's a very general topic, I'm sorry. And we'll start with Jillian, then Ikaika, then Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you, Lila, for touching on this topic. I think that in this election right now, that this is the one every 10-year chance that we have to re-elect every single seat, that every voter should vote primarily based on the character of the individual. And I'm very happy that whichever one of us three candidates is elected for Waikiki, I believe that we have all very strong and upright character and that we would not be open to corruption. But that can't be said, obviously, based on the history that we've seen, such as our two most recent legislators. So I think that doing things such as banning, say, campaign contributions during session, that's one step, and that would be something more transparent, but things are going on under the table as well. So I think that having as much transparency as possible in the process at the legislature and needing to justify why certain bills are killed, why don't some get hearings, why are some pushed through so quietly and then only become big news after they're already on the governor's desk. All of these things are happening behind closed doors. And although it may not be money changing hands, it is our taxpayer dollars. And in a way that is corruption, that we're putting things towards programs that the people aren't being knowledgeable of the justification as to why. So I certainly would take it very seriously, the power in which I would have. I would never, I'm very young, but I'm very much here for the right reasons. And I'm here to serve the people. And I hope that everyone running is able to make that case as well. And our voters are keen on that. And if something does come up, that we're able to root it out much quicker than we did previously.
Thank you, Jillian. Ikaika, you're next.
Piggybacking off of Jillian once again, she hit the nail on the head with that. So transparency is going to be a big thing. And in the last sessions, they're making decisions with doors closed, and that's not right. You know, the public didn't have access, and essentially what we did was we used the pandemic as the ability for us to be able to close the doors. When I say us, I mean the ledge, and they were able to move things in and out. And you know, the thing about it is, I have to touch on Kim Kokua once again, is, you know, for me, I'm all about term limits for legislators. I think that's going to be the next big step, because it's very hard to have people who have been in for so long, that have so much power, that up and coming legislators that don't want to anger the speaker or the finance chair will just follow along. And, you know, it's one of those things where it comes with time. You know, Adrian is a first-time incumbent. He's done a lot of great work, but he doesn't have that same kind of a power and authority and influence as Scott Psyche does, or Sylvia Luke. So with this, we definitely need to look at things like term limits. We definitely need to look at contributions, because pay to play is happening in Hawaii, whether we see it or not. The legislators are being bought by special interest groups. Take a look at who's donating to their campaigns. You'll find some answers. And sometimes it doesn't even show up. So there's that. But I would also like to even move one step further. I would be open, if I was elected, I'd be open to having a camera running in my office at all times. The public should have the ability, because things happen not in the House floor, they happen in offices, at the ledge. They're happening in the corridors. Discussions are happening that there's no accountability other than who's there. We all need to open up that transparency. And I think that's another big step, just running off of what Jillian said, that the public needs to have more access, more availability to hold their elected officials accountable.
Thank you, Ikaika. All right, Adrian.
Thank you, Lila, and thank you both for the good answers, actually. Growing up, my parents kind of told me and my sister that, we could be anything we wanted to be, but, jobs like the one that, our state legislatures or CEOs, et cetera, those are only reserved for the very powerful, the very wealthy, and those who went to Ivy Leagues. And I didn't believe them until I finally saw the corruption that's been going on. And this was long before I was elected, that was going on, that, yeah, I now know why my parents thought that way. And it's really sad. And, they taught us growing up that, if we ever get into a position like that, never take it for granted, always act on honesty, always ensure that you're doing the good people's work. And they also said, Adrian, you're small. If you're in jail, that's not going to go well for you. But one thing we need to do to continue to prevent this corruption from happening is to ensure that every lawmaker cooperates with the Justice Department if there is an investigation, not on themselves, but even on their colleagues. Because what those legislators did was already illegal. Now it's up to other legislators to cooperate and to provide any kind of information they know. We absolutely need to start banning campaign contributions during the elections, not just fundraising anymore. Fundraisers, it's fundraising. I want to support a full-time legislature so that no other legislators can have outside jobs. I want to open up our sunshine laws. And I want to make sure that any kind of contribution from a PAC that's $100 or less has to be disclosed, because right now they don't have to be. Those are some of the steps that we need to start taking to ensure that we're put back on this path to a less corrupt-free legislature and government.
Thank you. I appreciate all your answers. All right, Rick, you're next, please, with your question. Okay. And Rick, your question will first go to Ikaika, then Adrian, then Jillian.
All right, very good. So I had a couple questions I was going to ask, but they've kind of been touched on. So like you guys, piggybacking on everybody else. So I'm going to change. So I'm one of the directors here, and I've retired from 46 years in mental health. So I'm going to go back to my age-old question, and mostly because Ikaika, you kind of brought it up a little bit here around homelessness. Mental health. So only about 34% of our Hawaii population accesses mental health. The other 67% cannot get to it. What would you guys do to help with that? And I'm going to preface this a little bit too. The mental health issue that gets referred to as homelessness, that's not what the majority of mental health is. That's just some of the very visible mental health that we see. There's a lot of other mental health issues going on out there that are not being addressed. I won't get into all of that. I'll let you guys talk about what your knowledge of that is. And within your administration, what can you do to help with the mental health system? Thank you.
First would
thank
be,
you.
Go ahead, Ikaika.
Is it me? All right. Thanks, Rick. I actually just want to get started by saying I like your backdrop there. Looks nice and warm and sunny over there right now. Good for you. Mental health. So I appreciate your service. In this world of mental health, it's a very, very, very challenging. Your clients are going to be very, very, very challenging, and it's also very dynamic. So one of the big things we have to worry about is it's just the stigma of mental health in itself. And as someone with a background in mental health, you understand that normal people that may have an issue may not seek treatment because they feel like they're normal, or there might be a stigma. Like, for example, I was diagnosed with PTSD, and it's not something that I like to share because it makes me feel like I'm damaged. And I also don't want pity. Yes, Iraq was very traumatizing, but at the same time, I feel fine. And I don't want people to think that I'm damaged goods. So, opening up the dialogue for people to be able to think, hey, no, it's perfectly normal. Like any other disease, it's perfectly normal for you to seek help from it. And another problem that we have, and this comes from my work working with the homeless, is often the barriers. So you can't just walk into a psychologist's office and just be like, oh, hi, I feel like I need to talk to somebody. Depending on what their medical insurance looks like, or if they have no medical insurance, you need a referral. And that's a big barrier because people already have problems getting access to healthcare. Getting referrals is one more step. And that's a big barrier because if I feel like I need to talk to somebody right now, I have the passion, I have the motivation to be able to do it. If I have to go see my PCP in order to go talk to a specialist, I may not be able to see that day. I may not be able to see that month. So that's one problem. And the community health centers, I used to work for Waikiki Health, they have a really fantastic approach to that. But again, the problem is the price and what your insurance can cover. And also it's going to be access to medications. I have clients who I'm working with right now who have children, they're homeless, that the children can't get access to the medication needed for autism. And it's a huge barrier. And it's something that as a legislator, I would like to, one, push for just a political campaign to get more people to be open about it. But two, I would like to also take a look at ways of addressing the medical insurance issue that is oftentimes a big barrier for people to be able to go. Incentivize it with tax credits. If you need to see a health provider, a mental health provider, you should be able to go with the minimal amount of barriers possible and the least amount of cost, because if you don't, chances are you might come see me when you're homeless.
Thank you very much, Ikaika. Adrian, you're next.
Thank you for that question. So mental health continues to be stigmatized in a very negative way. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very open about, my sessions with talk therapy and that I go to them like every so often. I really want to end this stigma that we have on mental health because it's like getting a physical, in my opinion. It should be normalized and people shouldn't feel shamed for going to them. That being said, our office, this is something that I've done with my office, which was we implemented mental health days. So if anyone in our office needed a day where they really needed to take a break, they could use a mental health day. And, so our schools should be looking at that too. One thing that I really want to do is support mandatory mental health screenings that would be mandatory on the insurance companies to provide. The situation with that is that there wasn't many interest in that this past legislative session. And I feel like that was because not many people knew that this bill or resolution was on the docket. And as a result, we couldn't pass it because there was no testimony and the auditor didn't have the capacity to conduct the study to require a financial aspect on how we can provide mental health screenings. But going forward, I would like to ramp up a campaign so that there would be a coalition of support behind such an initiative that requires insurance companies to cover mandatory mental health screenings. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Jillian, please.
Thank you very much for your question, Rick. I feel like this is a topic that is far overdue for so much more serious legislation to help remedy. So mental health is definitely a spectrum in our community. And I think a lot of it, like you said, is not something that you're seeing from the outset, that it's something that's happening behind closed doors. But I'd first like to start at the most extreme end. Living in Waikiki, it is extremely prevalent. I can look out my window multiple times a day and see somebody who you can tell is in a mental health crisis. But currently, as it is with our laws, that there is little that can be done without them approving of what services would be provided for them. So I do like legislation that I've seen introduced where we would have social workers alongside law enforcement to address calls, because it is causing a reduction in public safety for those of us who are also trying to frequent public spaces. So I have actually seen that we had a new psychiatric facility that was made, I believe it was $160 million, and it sat empty for months. And even when it did open its doors, that it was destined for those who are already in psychiatric facilities, not those who are new. So I think that we need to invest more in the resources to treat those on our streets who have severe mental illness. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, we have those who go about their day-to-day lives and they just reach a tipping point where they feel like everything's closing in, especially exacerbated by the stresses of the pandemic, the lockdowns, not being able to see family and friends, just having our entire lives interrupted. And I actually, this is personal to me, that I've dealt with a situation with a very close friend who was having a crisis. And I was scouring on my phone trying to find a resource, someone to call to guide us. What do we do in this situation? And I was met with voicemails. I was met with operators who were extremely compassionate, but just said, like, I'm not really the one to help you. Here's another number. And I was just running the gambit and really did not ultimately ever receive help. And we're still going day to day trying to find a service, because it's not to the point that it's the extreme where you need to be admitted, but you just need someone to talk to, and maybe something a little bit more so than reading self-help books. So I think that this is definitely something that my generation in particular is destigmatizing, and is seeing that this is much more prevalent and is not something that should be behind closed doors, but is something that needs help. And I think that our state can invest in these areas for everyone on the spectrum.
Thank you very much, Jillian. Rick, I'm sure you're pleased with those answers. All right,
Yeah,
Barbara.
thank you very much. Very much appreciate your responses.
All right, thank you, Rick. Barbara, are you ready? Your questions will go to Adrian first, then to Jillian, then to Ikaika.
Hi, I'm Barbara Service. I'm a line officer or director, anyway, of Kokua Council. I've been on Kokua Council about 14 years. I'm interested, since the position you're running for is Waikiki, what can be done? What would be your initial response to solving the problem of increased crime in Waikiki?
Sorry,
I'm sorry. Oh, Adrian, okay.
Hi, Barbara. Nice to see you again. Thank you for your question. So crime has always been an issue since long before I was elected. In 2021, we decided to implement these citizens patrols to try to bring crime rates down and to integrate the community with HPD to work together with them. And that has been successful. Recently, we've seen a downward trend in many of our crimes. But moving forward, I really want to move away from monetary punitive kinds of punishments, because I don't believe that, monetary fines work. I honestly would rather see, whether it's, mandatory sentences or mandatory volunteer hours to ensure that this is a deterrent against crime. Last year, we passed a bill that would increase penalties for crimes committed against seniors. Unfortunately, I don't see that bill actually deterring crime at all, because if you are a criminal and you want to do something against someone who is age 62 and you can't even tell they're 62, you're not going to question, oh, if I commit this crime, I'm going to get 1 more month in prison, so I'm not going to do it. We have to get to the root of why crime happens. And this is more of a long-term solution, but we have to increase education structures to make sure that our standards are up to date, affordable housing and job opportunities, so people don't have to resort to a life of crime or end up homeless. In the meantime, specifically in Waikiki, I've worked with HPD on this issue for many months now, which is that we're looking to increase foot patrols around the Kuhio to Aloha area in those back streets, because that's where the residents live, that's where the lights are dimly lit, and that's where there's not much commercial activity going on. And because of that less than commercial activity, it's more dangerous. People are oftentimes more willing to lurk in those areas and to commit those crimes in those areas. But I'm really proud of the Citizens Patrol that we've put together and the numerous initiatives that we've done to ensure that Waikiki is safer. And I look forward to continuing doing that by helping the prosecutor's office bring in the core program and even the city's program and for weed and seed if we need to. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jillian, you're next.
Thank you for your question, Barbara. Crime is the #1 issue why I am running, particularly in a district like Waikiki. And it is a very complex issue, but I've broken it down into 2 main approaches, one of which is deterrence and the other one diversion. So on the deterrence side, right now, in some situations, you wonder why someone isn't committing a crime. I've spoken with our police officers, and I'm sure you're aware that they are very much understaffed. And it is very much a responsive versus preventative way right now in which they're patrolling our communities. So I have to walk down the street with my phone in my hand, ready to call 911 if a situation does occur, versus seeing a police officer on foot or patrolling the area, which I would think would very much deter criminals from even trying to commit a crime in the first place. And then we also have so much recidivism. We have some people committing over 100 offenses and are still on the street able to commit more. And one of the officers I spoke with, her face dropped, saying that there's been instances where she's made an arrest and that individual is back on the streets before her shift is over. So I think that we're better off not making the arrest at all versus showing that our system doesn't work and you can continue to commit the crimes. So on the other side of that, for diversion, for those of them who are arrested, what's happening after? So many of our crimes are property thefts, and many of our crimes are associated also with mental illness and substance abuse of drugs and alcohol. If you arrest somebody who is committing habitual theft of, say, alcohol out of a convenience store, putting the shop workers at risk, the fellow patrons at risk. If somebody does choose to intervene, we use our police resources to take them into custody, and then we put them back on the streets. Their issue is not as much that they are a thief, but that they have an alcohol abuse problem. So to be able to have a more wide spectrum of services upon arrest to determine how can we help this person? So they obviously need alcohol treatment. I don't think that a night in jail is going to solve their problem. So I think that Adrian is right that we need to look at the root causes of why these crimes are occurring. And if it is mental illness or substance abuse, have alternate areas other than jail or prison. And also with that, giving the proper resources to our law enforcement, as well as to OCCC. I was disappointed this year that they weren't given the funds requested and that they're also over capacity. So I think that we need to really look at the entire process from deterring crime all the way through if somebody needs to be convicted, where they go, and how that can help make our community safer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ikaika next, please.
All right, I just want to get started by saying I love your kitchen.
Thank you.
I love the scheme. Getting to go last, I get to piggyback on the previous 2 candidates. So again, I'm running on public safety. That's the #1 reason why I'm running. And again, I'm the only one that has boots on the ground experience dealing with this day to day. I like to throw out the name the Psycap family, who became notorious for what had happened. An interesting factoid about that is I've known that family for many, many years. I've been working with the older sisters, and I helped them graduate from high school. And now 2 of them are living perfectly normal lives. They're housed, they have regular jobs, they have their families. These were girls who were once upon a time living in a tent in Kaka'ako Park, back when there was the big encampment there, and then stealing backpacks in Waikiki on the beach. So Adrian was right. Education is a huge part of breaking down the barriers. For me, I work for the Department of Education's Homeless Concerns Office, and our model is to help keep kids engaged in school, because every year after 8th grade that we are able to keep them engaged, their trajectories for positivity increase substantially. So we do have kids who drop out at 6th, 7th, 8th grade here in Hawaii, and guess what they're doing? They're out on the streets, and they're the ones committing a lot of the petty crime out there. And what ends up happening is they know this system. I used to work with homeless youth in Waikiki at the youth outreach. They learn the system, and by the time they're adults, oftentimes they have committed so many crimes that once they're adult, they're not even scared to be incarcerated. So what ended up happening is we lost actions and consequences. And we're creating more problems for ourselves down the road. So education is vital. The second part is I have two small kids. My education's in psychology, and there needs to be actions and consequences if you want to instill discipline. If an action doesn't get the consequence, the action is going to continue, especially if it's a disciplinary action. So for me, I want to shift everything down. I talked to Steve last week. We're going to be talking again later on this week. We are both in the consensus. We need to shift laws down. There needs to be punishments. And I agree with Jillian. It's not right to just put the guys in timeout. Just like with my children, sometimes you need to be able to put them in timeout, but you also need to be able to give them options to do good. So piggybacking off what Jillian said, yes, I think OCCC is a mess. I'm very disappointed that the Ledge didn't fund the new prison. What I would like to see is a new prison, a modern prison put together, built so that we can properly incarcerate people who need to be incarcerated there, but then converting OCCC into a rehabilitation and vocational facility and give people a chance. Because again, getting to the root cause, there's a need. There's often a need for why people are committing the crimes that they're committing. Unless there's psychosis involved and there's a mental health issue going on, there's a need of why they're doing this. So I would like to see OCCC converted. And what we'll do is we'll give you an option. You want to go spend
You're
time
at 3 minutes.
Okay. Get the unions together and provide an opportunity. We'll get you a job. You can start learning a trade and you can start working as a laborer and make good money or go to jail.
Thank you very much. All right, well, this will be our last question. This comes from Kate, and you might have seen it in the chat. What do candidates feel about the state's position on self-governance in condominium associations to absolve agencies from aiding condominium owners? Okay, so it's a little complicated. Hope you understand. The question goes first to Jillian, then to Ikaika, then to Adrian.
So I'm not actually 100% sure what this question is referring to, but in general, I do support having the most ability of self-governance. As a Republican, I very much believe in limited government. So if this is something that would benefit those in the condominiums, if they're able to govern themselves and to eliminate that middleman of the association, then I would support that.
All right, thank you, Jillian. Ikaika, your response, please.
I'm in the same boat as Jillian, to be honest. I only heard this term getting thrown around at our last board meeting. And again, I agree with Jillian. If the condominium owners, as an owner, I always feel trapped in my building, in my association. If there was a way to get more power to the owners and less to the association, and even worse, the management company, I would like to see that happen.
Thank you very much, Ikaika. Adrian?
I too will agree with the other two candidates. You know, when it comes to self-government, I would like to give more power to the condo owners. Piggybacking on what Greg said earlier, you know, government should be there just to enforce the laws that are currently on the books and to root out corruption if there is something there. And that's why, you know, I am supportive of an idea of creating a condo liaison in our state government to help navigate these various issues with our condominium owners.
Thank you very much. I invite all three of you to join when Hui Oyayo has one of our condo owner coalition meetings to talk to you about self-governance. But at any rate, we're near the end of our forum. I'd like to give each of you an opportunity for a closing statement. So we'll start with Ikaika, then with Adrian, then Jillian. So go ahead, please, Ikaika.
I just want to get started by saying, you know, thank you all very much for this opportunity. The three of us, you know, it's great for us to be able to get together, and it's great to be able to reach the people in our area and allow people the opportunity to be able to hear the different perspectives and angles that we have on certain issues. I just like to close, you know, again, I'm a reluctant candidate. I'm already helping my community in my current role, and running for an office is just going to be taking time away from my family. But I see it as a means to be able to help both build a better life for my children and to help my community, because growing up in Kailua, I grew up in a completely different environment. We didn't lock our doors. we played outside by ourselves, unsupervised without our parents. I understand Honolulu is not the same animal, but at the same time, it doesn't mean we can't try to make it better. I've proven myself on the battlefield in Iraq. I've come home and I've been on the streets every single day trying to make our community safer by getting these individuals housed and giving people a possibility. And I work with criminals and try to prevent crime in the same way of addressing basic needs. So, I would be a champion for some of the main causes that we have here in our district. And I bring real valuable experience that the other candidates don't have into the legislature.
Thank you, Lila, and thank you, Kokua Council, for hosting this morning/afternoon forum. I'm really grateful for the honor of representing Waikiki in the past year and a half, and I'm hoping for the honor again to represent it again. I want to just talk about what really inspires me to run for re-election. Lila, it's people like you that inspire me to run for re-election. Because you are an advocate. You took matters into your own hands. You didn't want to wait for government bureaucracy to take charge to change things for the better for yourself and your family. And I approach this job with that same mentality every single day, because I know that the successes of our office does not come from just one individual, but comes from all of us working together. I got into politics not because I wanted to, but because I saw a government that wasn't working for us. I was going to too many goodbye farewell parties for many of my friends that I grew up with in high school that are just leaving Hawaii because it's just too expensive to live here. It's not because they can't find a job here, it's just because they couldn't afford to own a place. And they're tired of working 2-3 jobs. I worked 2 jobs just to get by. I'm just going to say it, the other day, I had a meeting with a constituent and she literally looked at me and said, "Oh, Adrian, you look really tired." And I said, "Yes, because I am tired. I love doing this work and I really want to do a good job at it. I spend all my hours working here, but it's still not enough. And that's why at night I drive Uber sometimes. I want to change that so that no one has to work 2 or 3 jobs just to get by, including myself. That's like a selfish reason, but that's I consider myself very fortunate. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that are not as fortunate as I am, and I really want to change that for them. So, and I would be honored to have another term to try to fix that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adrian. Jillian, you're next.
I'd just like to start off by thanking you once again, Lila, and the rest of the Kokua Council for your wonderful questions today. I think it was very enlightening, and I love informing our voters about our candidates and our issues. So I think that this was a great opportunity for everyone. I'm running really because of a need, a very great need that I'm sure many people share here in our state. That there's great sacrifice to live in our paradise. You need to sacrifice your financial comfort. You need to sacrifice now your personal safety and your quality of life. And it's just reaching a point that so many people are having a serious discussion that, is it worth it? Is all this sacrifice worthwhile? And I think that this is something that we cannot just leave unaddressed. And having had experience as a legislative analyst and seeing our capital and how the policies directly affect our people, I see so much room for change. And I have not seen so many things addressed in the last session and previous sessions, and things just continue to get worse and worse. So if I were elected, I would definitely look at our urgent needs and see the potentials that are possible through legislation to remedy those. And we can't keep losing our younger generations to the mainland or foreign countries. And we can't keep letting our kapuna suffer because of our cost of living and the uncertainty that's coming to our state and the reducing public safety. So I really encourage, I have a lot of information on my website. It's jillianforhawaii.com. And I look forward to what's yet to come in this race and to potentially represent Waikiki. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have to say that all 3 candidates really made me feel good just listening to all 3 of you. Our future is in your hands. So please, whatever you do for us, think about what we've committed to our community, the hours, the days, the years that we put in trying to make the community what it is, how disappointed we are that Hawaii is in the current state that it is. The kind of fears we have that our children, our grandchildren may be held hostage to these black hole projects that we talked about earlier. So please think about those things too. And I really appreciate your contributions, your volunteerism. I understand the reluctance to participate, but the necessity. And that's where a lot of us are as advocates. Mahalo to our audience. Thank you to everyone for participating in today's House District 24 Candidates Forum. We invite you to join our future programs to meet more candidates for 2022. Besides that, we'll have forums on legislative measures, discussions about healthcare, kupuna care, affordable housing, homelessness, houselessness, homeowners association issues, and I invite the three of you to my WHOI's meetings. I'll end this meeting now. Thank you very much for your participation. It was enlightening. I really enjoyed listening to the three of you. Mahalo.
Yeah, mahalo, guys.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Aloha.